Farce, Sigmund Right Nasty, Z Riz, F Whirlybird, Alert Scarecrow. All right, use a little cadence here. All right, you ready?
Are you sure about this?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the best way to focus on football, right? So get your eyes on the safety, be vocal out there.
Yes, Coach. I mean, Uncle E.
It's better.
Green 18! Green 18! Omaha? So hut!
Ready. All right, there he is. Now!
Boom!
Touchdown! Now that's why you're in the game.
EA Sports. I'm in the game.
Whew. You know, we could have just run 4 verts.
Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. My name is Michael Ween, and that was Arch Manning announcing that he is going to officially be in the 2024 college football video game that is being 25 that is being released here in a little over a week, I believe. So that's exciting. After originally declaring he was not going to be in the game, he is now going to be in the game. So if you are purchasing that game, you're going to be playing that game, and you are a Texas fan, you will get to officially, I guess, play with Arch Manning. And the sad thing is, I know a lot of Texas fans are going to go into the depth chart and swap Quinn Ewers for Arch Manning as the starting quarterback when they're building those dynasty leagues. There's nothing you can really do about it. It's Arch Manning. Welcome back, guys. After a 4th of July weekend layoff, we are back here on this Tuesday evening, July 9th, 10:43 p.m. I'm high atop a post-Hurricane Beryl, Houston, Texas. Still recovering from that, and that is the reason why my internet is appearing to be fairly slow tonight. But there's nothing I can really do about that. So, with all that being said, we have a loaded show tonight. We've got a big-time recruiting Q&A, as there was some bad news and a little bit of good news on the recruiting front for Texas on the football side of things this weekend, as we're now officially into July. We've also got some big news that we're going to discuss regarding Texas women's basketball. And then we're starting our 2024 college football team previews today down in the Sunshine State with the Miami Hurricanes and the Florida Gators. So, hope you guys enjoy. If you like what we do here, make sure you like and subscribe. And joining me to talk football, a lot of it, and a little bit of basketball, is my excellent co-host and fellow Longhorn fan himself, Mr. Emmy Nixon, as we are now, I believe it is 51 days away from SEC football.
Yeah, man. Every day it gets closer. We're counting down hours at this point. Not quite actually, but I mean, these college football previews are gonna fly by. We're gonna focus on obviously the top schools in the core 4 conferences, but specifically the SEC is where we're gonna focus the main part of our coverage and a lot of these previews. I think we're gonna cover top 2 in ACC here and there, and then the majority of our time is going to be spent on the SEC, and then there's also going to be some discussion of the top 4 in the Big Ten as well.
Yes. Our focus is, of course, going to be in the SEC. We're going to cover 11 teams from Florida all the way to the top in order of a ranking. So Florida's our first team. You will see, I guess, how that unfolds as we go. We're not covering any Big Ten teams here today, but we will be covering, I believe it is 4 or 5 Big Ten teams. I haven't decided whether or not I want to do USC or just stick to the top 4. We'll figure that out. We have 3 ACC teams that we're going to end up talking about, the first of which tonight with the Miami Hurricanes. So hope you guys enjoy that. We're going to try to get through this other recruiting stuff and the Texas women's basketball news really fast so that we can get to what you guys are waiting for, which is those team previews.
Right.
And we'll talk about how that's going to work when we get there. Really fast, I thought I would address some big news with Texas women's basketball, and we can talk about this more in depth on another episode. But as you guys know, Vic Schaefer is the head coach of the Texas women's basketball team. They've been to the Elite Eight 3 of the last 4 seasons with him at the helm. So they've had a very successful run. As we know, last year, the big question is, what if Rory Harmon, their point guard, didn't suffer that ACL injury in the non-conference play? Well, we'll never know. But Madison Booker really emerged as a freshman, as kind of that point forward leading scorer as a freshman. And now you have Rory Harmon coming back next year, along with 2 5-stars coming in the 2024 recruiting class, which we're not going to touch on today because we don't have the time. But Vic Schaefer is not only bringing good talent in here and there in the portal, as you would think he would, but he's also recruiting at a very high level at the high school level. You think about Madison Booker, very good, like a top 10 level 2024 class. Those will be freshmen this upcoming year. And then that leads us to today's news, which happened yesterday. 5-star combo guard Aaliyah Crump out of the state of Minnesota committed to Texas yesterday. She's the number 4 overall player in the 2025 class, according to ESPN.com, which is really the only outlet as of right now that does women's basketball recruiting rankings. So that's the only ranking we really have to go off. She is a 5-star. She's a consensus top 5 player in next year's class. She chooses Texas she actually chose it on Monday, so this was 2 days ago, over Duke and Ohio State. So Texas wins a huge recruitment. Let me tell you a little bit about her and how I think this impacts the future of Texas women's basketball, and then we'll move on into our football recruiting stuff, unless you want to comment on anything. She's a 6'1" shooting guard / small forward out of Minnetonka High School, which is, I guess, Class 4A classification in the state of Minnesota. And she'll be looking to fit right into a program that, as I mentioned, had a lot of tournament success, but has yet to really jump over the final hurdle, which is getting to the Final Four,
right,
and potentially competing on a Sunday for a national championship, which is, what Vic Schaefer in this program eventually expects to do.
Right.
So you're not going to see Aaliyah Crump next year, meaning this upcoming year. You'll have to wait until 2025. So she still has another full year to continue to develop at the high school level. And we'll certainly be monitoring that throughout the women's basketball season. And it's certainly going to be fun to see her as a freshman in 2025 potentially mix with another excellent wing who will now be a third year when you think about 2025 in Madison Booker. I mean, think about how good she could be at that point. And then you throw in the 2 5-stars from this upcoming class who will be freshmen this year. And then Aaliyah Crump, who's a 5-star talented wing player in 2025. Vic Schaefer is starting to stack talent at an elite level with the elite of the elite. But in terms of Crump and her fit with Texas and a little bit about her, she led her high school to a 4A state championship this past year, scoring over 25 per game. She's a very good shot maker, especially beyond the 3-point line. Takes really good shots. She's a really smart player, high basketball IQ, solid rebounder for her size. She can rebound her position really well. Doesn't really take forced shots, has a good handle. I wish I could show you highlights. Maybe we'll get into that in a later episode when I have those prepared for you guys. But you can certainly go look her up on YouTube. I highly recommend it. I think at the next level, she's going to be best off the ball because she's really a shooting threat. Not that she can't score on the ball, but her skill is her shot making ability. And she moves well without the ball. And I think as she continues to develop the on ball part of her game, just having that size on the wing, along with that shooting with Madison Booker, who can already run the point and is more of a shooter, I think, also a shooter, and more of an on-ball scorer, that could be really dangerous. But it's big news for Texas women's basketball, who continues to stack talent. I think she's going to flourish during her time in Austin. She kind of 24/7 Sports compared her, and I know you watched some WNBA here lately. Indiana Fever, the team that Caitlin Clark now plays for, as you all pretty much know, even if you haven't watched their games. They have a guard named Lexi Hull, who played for Stanford, and she helped Stanford to a national championship while averaging double digits in 3 of her 4 seasons there when she was in college. And 24/7 Sports kind of compared Aaliyah Crump to Lexi Hull, because I think by that time next year, her shooting ability will be a big separator for Texas, along with the scoring of Madison Booker. Rory Harmon will be gone by then, but they have a 5-star guard coming in this year. That'll be a sophomore. And then they're in contention to get actually the number 1 overall player in the 2025 class, who's a point guard from, get this, Lubbock, Texas. So by next year, the Texas women's basketball team could be talking about Madison Booker and 4 5-stars, along with any other transfers that they're able to pull in.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's that. That's the big news on the Texas women's basketball side. That will go more in depth later on, but I needed to get out now because some of the biggest news.
Yeah, while it's still hot, I think. I mean, with how good the tournament was last year, I mean, I'll definitely be dabbling with some more, regular season ball here and there when I get the chance, just because I didn't really watch this Texas team much, even though they were really good the whole year. I just didn't really get to watch them. But now that they're going to be on SEC Network more, I'll be able to watch their games. So
yeah, and what happened in that Elite Eight game? They didn't shoot the ball well.
Yeah,
these prospects are going to add a ton more shooting. And as Madison Booker continues to get better, that should solve that issue, which has plagued Texas in some of their exits from the tournament the past couple of years. But Aaliyah Crump, she spells her name kind of weird. It's AALIYAH, Crump, CRUMP. Just look her up. She plays for Team USA. Find a ton of highlights on her. We'll eventually get into that, but we don't have time tonight. So with all that being said, any comments, questions on that story before we move on?
I do find it interesting that she's like that we prioritize her as a guard, because we're seeing so many like elite guards emerge out of the all across the country, like as freshmen. Like there's this freshman guard off the bench at South Carolina, of course, that was averaging like 13, 14 a game. Then, of course, you got like Juju Watkins, who was putting up the numbers she was, I think she dropped, what, like 70 in a game one time this year? Or it was like 50 or something like that. She broke the
Yeah.
record, the freshman record for a game. I can't remember what the number was, but I think guards are becoming more and more important in women's basketball. I feel like before it was a lot more about bigs and controlling the paint.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. Okay. Much more basketball content coming down the road. But let's move on to our 2025 recruiting Q&A. As we told you on our last episode, and by the way, really fast footnote. I don't know if you've seen this yet because we haven't talked off the air much lately. But I was looking at our live shows today just to see, like, okay, how we've been doing on thumbnails, and which shows have been getting good views.
Traction.
The Jim Schlossnagle Hire Instant Reaction, 38 views on YouTube.
Yeah.
Pretty good for us. That's one of our higher rated Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports episodes, if I'm not mistaken. And then our 2024 NBA Draft First Round Reaction did very well, 20 views as of when I looked this afternoon. And our 2024 Free Agent Frenzy reaction show, which we recorded last week, also did very well. It was tied with the Jim Schlossnagle episode at 38 views. So pretty good. Our other dit holes are getting views, just not to that extent. So I'm fairly happy with where we're at right now with regards to this particular show and some of the other stuff that we're doing. I think the NFL previews, which we're going to start on Thursday, by the way, should do very well as long as we keep those episodes to, I think, well, side note for you guys,
45 minutes to an hour, hopefully.
It's gonna be 2 teams per episode, so I think 45 minutes is probably the sweet spot there. As long as we can do that, make the thumbnails, pretty, not pretty, but have a draw
intriguing
to them. And then make the titles like questions or whatever it may be. Those should do well as well. And college football fans are going to attract to this kind of content that we're doing here today. So I'm happy with where we're at. But as we told you on our last episode, Emmy's going to be the moderator for these recruiting discussions for the foreseeable future until we get to later in the period and signing day, which is when he'll kind of give his input more. But Emmy, I'm going to ask you for today, if you're looking at the questions that I sent you on our outline, we're going to skip number 4. So we're not going to do number 4 tonight. We're just going to do 1 through 3. Okay. But you can go ahead. You can go ahead and get us started.
Well, this one, I think we can kind of go back and forth because I actually do have some things I want to say with this as well. This was really, really big news that came last week, and we discussed at length off the show as well. What is the significance of losing DeCorian Moore's recruitment to Oregon?
Well, I'm actually, now that you say that, interested to hear some of your thoughts. So why don't you just go ahead and, before I start rambling, why don't you go ahead and give some of your thoughts on it?
Well, so here's the thing. I think obviously there's a long way to go in this cycle. There's still other wide receivers we can go get. But I think the significance of it, to answer this question, is Oregon is a real threat with what they're building over there. I think they're going to be in the mix for national championships for a long time, man. They're going to be a powerhouse. Now that they're in the Big Ten, there's no reason for these players to be like, oh, I'm going to be in the Pac-12 where I may not be able to, show out on national TV as often or be able to compete for Heisman trophies like I want to. That's not really going to be a problem for them anymore now that they're in the Big Ten and they're playing these premier schools in the central time zone where the Pacific time zone isn't going to be as much of a factor. So not to mention the NIL stuff as well. They're, like we mentioned last time, swinging a big stick when it comes to this NIL stuff. That's the significance. It's Oregon and what they're building up there. It's there's going to be a lot more of these battles for years to come. This is going to be one of many, and we're going to win some and we're going to lose some. But this is just the beginning. I think that's the significance of it.
You're not wrong. Not anything you said was wrong. I'll just go ahead and elaborate on it. Here's the thing. From an overall perspective, we just have to call it like it is. I don't like it, but we have to call it what it is. The momentum that we have typically seen under Steve Sarkisian and this coaching staff from a recruiting standpoint in their first three classes. We're talking 2022, 2023, the class with Arch Manning, and then last year's class, the class with Colin Simmons, Ryan Wingo, Brandon Baker. The list goes on and on. All of which finished within the top 5 nationally in recruiting. Bunch of super blue chips, high-level classes up that basically closed the gap between Texas's roster and the top 3 rosters in the country when we look at high-end level talent, super blue chips, high 4 stars and 5 stars. A couple of years ago, the difference between the number of super blue chips that programs like Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State had and Texas had, the difference was like between 20 and 30 players at most points in times. Now that difference is single digits, and Texas is now 4th, just below those 3 schools in terms of the number of super blue chips that they have. So when you take it from an overall perspective, this program and this roster, with what they're also doing in the portal and will continue to do year over year, is in the best spot it's been since the 2009-2010 seasons when it comes to high-end level talent.
Yeah.
It's very comparable to the team that played for the national championship. The program's in a great spot, but the momentum with this 2025 recruiting class is not near what it needs to be. And the class right now, even though I think there are some really good football players that could end up being really nice players at the college level, even 1 or 2 I think could be elite players at the college level. There are not yet any super blue chips in this class, although I kind of count Lance Jackson as a super blue chip because I think he's going to end up as a 5-star. We're not going to talk about that tonight, but we'll get into that in a later episode. They've got 8 4-stars and 5 3-stars. And I do think 1 or 2 of those 3 stars could turn into 4 stars. But the bottom line is like Texas ranks 32nd in the Rivals recruiting team rankings right now for 2025. That's just not acceptable. Now, I think there's a lot that goes into it. They also, when you consider that Riley Pettijohn, their top linebacker target over the weekend on Saturday, committed to Ohio State. When you consider that Lamont Rogers, who I think is the second best offensive lineman behind Michael Fasusi in the state of Texas for 2025 over the weekend, committed to Missouri. And when you consider that Decoria Moore, who is the best wide receiver prospect, the highest rated wide receiver prospect in the state of Texas in the last 20 years, committed to Oregon, after he's already decommitted once from another school, Texas will likely go into August with 0 commitments from the top 15 players in the state of Texas, which is just unheard of because
Wow.
a
Yeah.
lot of people for the better half of a decade have said, boy, and Texas was already recruiting well at this point, but they weren't recruiting to the level that they were now. I won't get into that whole discussion right now. But a lot of people for the better half of a decade, when Texas was in the darkest of times, and we don't have to go too far back to remember those times, you know, the Charlie Strong, Tom Herman days, even though there was 1 or 2 good years under Herman, it still wasn't, you know, the roster wasn't where it needs to be. People said, like, boy, if Texas starts winning football games and they can win on the field, the recruiting is just going to skyrocket. Like, they could start signing number 1 and number 2 classes like Georgia and Alabama have the past decade. Prospects are going to be knocking down the doors at Texas if Texas starts actually doing what they say they're going to do on the football field. And then 2023 happens. This past season, Texas wins a conference championship. They go 12-1, and they make it to the playoff. They lose to Washington, who was a very good team, by the way, and had a chance to win that game. And yet, here we are 6 months later, and it doesn't feel like there's been a spark yet in this recruiting class. One that takes this class from being just okay to skyrocketing up the rankings to around top 5, top 10 area where you would expect them to be. So the momentum's not where it is. It is not where it needs to be. But in terms of Dakorien Moore, it's not great to lose the number 1 prospect in the state of Texas. But this is really actually nothing new for the Texas Longhorns. Believe it or not, it's been a while since Texas has landed the number 1 overall wide receiver in the state. They missed out on Jalen Waddle. They missed out on Micah Hudson last year. They've missed a couple times. It's not just Dakorien Moore. Yet, wide receiver is one of those positions where, number 1, the saturation of talent just in the state of Texas. We're not even talking about any other place aside from the state of Texas, right? Just in this state, not even Jamie French down in Jacksonville. Just in the state, there are a couple other really high-level, super blue chip kind of wide receivers that if Texas can get, it still make this class very, very good. And that's not even counting Jamie French, who I think Texas will get when it's all said and done. There's the Khalil Lockett's of the world, the Kelshawn Johnsons. The list goes on, right? The Dalen McCutcheons. We also seen what Sark has done in the portal, and Texas already has 2 5-stars on campus right now, one of which is going to be a sophomore and has 2 years left minimum before he goes to the draft in Jonte Cook. And the other is just a freshman, is going to be here for the next 3 years minimum before he goes to the draft in Ryan Wingo. And that doesn't even count other highly rated recruits like Parker Livingston, Matthew Golden, who is going to have, Silas Bolden and Matthew Golden are likely done after this year, but Isaiah Bond could come back if he wanted to, but he's going to leave. If he has the year people think he's going to, he's going to be borderline first-round pick, in my opinion. But we've seen what Texas has done in the portal. So from a positional standpoint, even though you love to have Dakorien Moore, from a class momentum standpoint, you don't worry about wide receiver. They're going to get the receivers they need, whether it's through recruiting and other consolation prizes that we call them. Jamie French, Khalil Lockett, who are still elite prospects. But in terms of why Texas has now lost a couple of these big recruitments, and this is where I'll kind of stop it for right now. it's really hard to pinpoint why they haven't been able to get the traction or the momentum that we all thought they would. Because it's been reported now that Texas, remember how I talked about last episode how Texas has been very careful about where they go with their NIL discussions with a lot of these recruits. They've been very hesitant to go above like $750,000. $750,000 is typically where they land. And that's kind of where they've drawn the line. With Decoria Moore, they went over $1 million. They went 7 figures. This is a guy they really want. And I think they're still going to stay on him. Here's my thought though. He's already flipped once. And if you read the quotes that his mom had to say about Oregon after the official visit there, which looking back on it, we probably should have paid more attention to. I just find it kind of hard to see Decoria Moore flipping again in December, because Oregon, even though they haven't really broken down the door of the playoff yet, they're going to be just as good, if not potentially better, or on at least the same kind of level as Texas with their roster talent over the next 3 to 5 years. They have their own, way of going about the quarterback position. They have a 5-star that's probably going to start next year once Dylan Gabriel leaves, and Dante Moore might not be Arch Manning in terms of the name value that he provides and the height that he's going to provide, but he's still a 5-star prospect that you can get really excited about. You see the way that they're building this 2025 class around Decoria Moore. They might get Jonah Williams, who's maybe the best defensive player in the state of Texas. They've already gotten Jordan Davidson and a bunch of other super blue chips in this class already. They have the NIL money. I think Texas isn't going to give up. They've proven that. But if I'm Texas, this really, I think, what the significance of it is now you have to get both Khalid Lockett and Jamie French. The thought before was, okay, you get Decoria Moore and you'll get one of the two when it's all said and done of Khalid Lockett and or Jamie French. Now you got to get both of them if you want to have the kind of class that Texas fans and the Texas coaching staff itself expects them to have in recruiting. That's really it. I can't pinpoint why they lost the recruitment. I just tip my hat to Oregon and say what Dan Lanning and they're doing up there is working, because when it's all said and done, Decoria Moore isn't going to be the only guy that Oregon takes out of the state of Texas, believe it or not. Jonah Williams could potentially be one. He's trending that way. There could be others. So tip my hat to Oregon. They're doing a hell of a job up there. They got momentum right now. In Texas, you're not where you need to be right now, but you give the staff the benefit of the doubt, and you put your head down and you try to change things. And I think they will change. I still think this is going to be a really good class with a bunch of super blue chips. And at the end of the day, I do think there will be 1 or 2 flips when it's all said and done, because Texas has proven that they like to chase rather than defend. And they've been successful in flipping elite guys in the past. I just don't believe it or not, after everything that we said about Decoria Moore for the last couple of months, and that he's going to go to Texas. Well, we were wrong. We read this recruitment wrong. I think that Oregon official visit that he took and the NIL money, of course, had a lot to do with it. But Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of what I would tell Texas fans is don't panic, but just be aware that the recruiting momentum is not where it needs to be right now. Sorry for the long dissertation, but that's that.
Yeah.
All right, next question.
All right. Next question. Texas has picked up 2 commitments in July. Give your instant analysis on both. Edge, Smith, or Rogbo first.
Well, let's do this. Let's go most recent. So on Saturday, there was actually some good recruiting news. Texas picked up a 4-star defensive back out of the Houston area. 2025 Missouri City Fort Bend Hightower High School defensive back Cade Phillips. They got him over LSU and Texas A&M. So a big win in the secondary for this Texas staff. He now pairs with Caleb Chester in this secondary class so far. Look, I think with Cade Phillips, who's currently 6'2", 170, 175 pounds, a lot of really nice tools. I think what Texas tells these guys is you're going to start out as a defensive back. We'll see if you work there. If not, you're going to safety. And I think Cade Phillips was fine with that pitch, which is why he chose the Longhorns. I think ultimately Cade Phillips, where he might end up, I guess, fulfilling his potential is at the safety position. I'm not quite sure he's going to work at corner at the next level. But I think he can actually play both. And that's some of the versatility that he has is what this staff really likes about him. He's got adequate height. He's got room to add bulk to his frame. Most of his highlights, if you go watch his huddle, are at safety, both single high and 2 high looks. He's got good acceleration. He's a very smart football player. He diagnoses the play really well. He's fairly instinctive, both at corner and at safety. He's got really good instincts in coming downhill and fitting the run, which I really like about him. And when he hits you, you're going down. And his speed for his size, his top end speed and acceleration for his size is really good for his position. What kind of some of the areas that he'll need to work on, his ball skills are kind of a bit unknown at this point. Most of his highlights are against the run and in the screen game. So he'll need to, I guess, work on that, being more of a playmaker. We'll see how much of a playmaker he can be at the next level. I don't know that he's as talented as, say, Xavier Filsaime, but he's a really good football player and a guy that I was really excited Texas was able to get over LSU. Smith-Orogbo, I kind of compare him to Zina Umeozulu in last year's class. He's got room to fill out. He's kind of more of a, I don't want to say tweener, but he's not like your Lance Jackson. He's not 6'6", 270 pounds. He's more of that 6'4", 6'5", 225, 230, kind of like Zina Umeozulu with length, with the body type to get up to 250, 260 eventually.
Right.
But he's a really good football player. I won't go too much deeper than that, but just go watch his highlights. Really good football player and a good edge prospect to pair with Lance Jackson. I think Lance Jackson's going to play the strong side, and Smith Arabo will end up playing the weak side, if you will, weak edge. But really good football player, good frame, good athleticism, and good change of direction. He's not quite Colin Simmons in terms of his get off, BGO, ball get off, and that's why he's not a 5-star. But really good prospect. He's out of Alif Hastings here in the state of Texas. And Texas right now is, out of all the positions on the football field, aside from quarterback, receiver, running back, I mean, edge right now is kind of like right up there with the way that they're stacking talent at that position. You got Colin Simmons and Zena Umeozulu last year. Now you have Lance Jackson, who I think is going to be a 5-star. And you have Smith Arogbo. Could add one more potentially when it's all said and done to this class. What they've now done in the portal with Trey Moore, like the edge position, which a couple of years ago was one of the problem points of this Texas roster and has been for a while now, is now as deep as any other room on the entire roster. So good for them. Those are the two commitments. We're 43 minutes in. I know you asked about defensive line recruiting on our last show. We're unfortunately not going to get to that right now because we got to get to these team previews.
Yeah, got to get these previews.
And when I get to talking recruiting, I can go forever. So we'll go to the team previews now, but those are two solid commitments. They're not super blue chips by any stretch of the imagination. How excited should you get about them? I think both guys are going to need a year, maybe 2 years to get stronger, develop their frames, and with the way the Texas depth chart is setting up at both the secondary and the edge positions, it's just going to be hard for them to get playing time right away. I don't think they're day one difference makers. Texas won't need them to be, presumably. But by year 2, year 3, you should expect those guys to be seeing, like, competing for starting roles and just being really solid, good college football players. And typically at that 4-star level, guys turn into, well, depending on, high 4-star, mid 4-star, low 4-star, it's typically like a 20 to 30% success rate with guys getting drafted into the NFL from the state of Texas. Right. So you get, 10 of those guys, the likelihood is you'll get 2 or 3 NFL players, which is really, really good. And if you can get more than that, well, you're beating the math, and that's how you get to where Georgia is, Alabama, and those programs are. So with that, I'll shut up. Let's get into our team previews.
All right, let's do it. Do you want to start with Miami or Florida?
I was thinking Florida. Let's start with the SEC.
All right.
So review of so this is how it's going to work. And we're going to go pretty fast for this episode. We're going to do a 2023 year in review, just record what happened. We're going to get into coaching staff pressure meter. We're going to get into their portal moves. We're going to get into players that we're watching. And then we're going to do a quick schedule breakdown and an over-under win total prediction. Okay, so Florida is coming off 3 consecutive losing seasons. Not typically what you see at Florida. 2021, 6-7. 2022, 6-7. In 2023, last year, 5-7. They were 3-5 in the SEC. They actually had, by my count, a couple of close losses that could have gone their way. The two in particular that I look at was that Arkansas game, which they lost 39-36, and at Missouri, a game that they lost by 33-31. Those games go their way, we could be looking at this Florida program totally differently right now. But
Right.
3 straight losing seasons. Florida has not had 4 consecutive losing seasons since 1935. 1935. So that's what they'll have to avoid this upcoming year. That's as far as we're going to go in terms of 2023 recap, because we really don't.
Right.
We'll go deeper on other teams, but we really don't have time right now. Let's talk about Billy Napier really fast. On a scale of 1 to 10, he's now going into his 3rd year at Florida. How much pressure is on Billy Napier to have success? And for this Florida team in 2023, what do you think success is with the schedule that they're battling? I mean, do you think it's you gotta go 7-5 or you're out? How much pressure is he under, in your opinion?
Yeah, to me, it's 7-5. I think that should be the goal, especially since you have year 2 of a quarterback you went out and grabbed from the transfer portal, and you're bringing back a strong receiving core, a running back that you feel very confident in Montrell Johnson Jr., and a premier offensive line as well. Their offensive line, by PFF standards, was rated top 10 in college football last season. So, and they're returning a lot of those guys. The tough part is going to be with the defense. They lost a lot of guys in the secondary to the transfer portal. They lost one of their best edge rushers, Princely Omanmielen.
Yep.
Sorry, I probably butchered that, but they lost him to the transfer portal to Ole Miss, and then lost 2 of their top 3 cornerbacks. So the defense to me is going to be the big issue, and they're going to have to find a ways to win some shootouts and win those close games that they didn't last year.
So on the scale of 1 to 10, where would you put the pressure meter for Billy Napier? Just throw something out there.
I'm gonna say 8.
Okay.
Listening to the episode he did with Josh Pate, I think there's reason to believe that, that there would be a bit of a leash there, considering what had to be built to even just get the program to this point, to even be in the spot they're in, like with how they structure their NIL stuff, with how they, run their program. Like he's had to do so much stuff on the management logistics side of things that now it's time to just focus on football. And I think it would be nice if Florida gave him 2 years of that, but we'll have to see on that.
I would put it at about an 8.5. I think for me, when I look at this Florida roster and the makeup of this program right now, I think with this schedule, 6-6 minimum with a bowl appearance and a potential to get a 7th win is where I think he's got to get to save face and save his job.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact of the matter is the 3rd year of your tenure is really when you're supposed to take that next level leap. in most cases. And so far, we really haven't seen any sort of leap with this Florida roster, although they were in some games last year that they could have won, I should point out, as I did earlier. 11-14 overall, 2-6 on the road. That's got to get better. 2-10 against top 25 opponents. Not great, not good, but at least he's got a couple wins over top 25 level opponents. That's still got to get better. It is Florida that we're talking about. These fans are rabid. They expect to win. And he's got to get this program going in the right direction. So, overall, what he did at Louisiana before he got hired at Florida was very impressive. As a head coach, he's still 51-26 overall. He's 2-2 in bowl games. He's 20-13 on the road. He's got 3 wins against top 25 opponents. But at Florida, he's got to start turning the ship around. Now, where I will give him a little bit of credit, and we'll move on, is he is recruiting at a fairly high level. Florida in the 2024 class did get, I think, 2 or 3 5-stars. So they've always been able to recruit elite talent. I think what they did in the portal this year, which we're going to talk about next, is pretty impressive. You have now a second-year quarterback in this system. The pressure's on now. So I'd go about an 8.5 for the pressure meter.
Right. Hey, am I frozen on your screen also?
Yes, you are. I can hear you, though.
Okay. Okay, we'll continue. So it's okay.
We'll just have to go with that. Okay, so in terms of the transfer portal, how would you kind of assess what they did in the portal? Or do you have anything that stands out to you in terms of what they brought in the transfer portal?
Well, I think they brought in a wide receiver from Arizona State, Elijah Badger, 76.7 PFF grade last season. They wanted to bring in a complement to their guy they already have. What's his name? Their true freshman last season. That was Eugene Wilson III. Sorry. Yeah, Eugene Wilson III. They wanted to bring in a complement for him, and it adds depth to their receiving core, which is good. They added Cormani McClain as well, which was a much needed get because they lost like their starting corners to the transfer portal, so they had to get a replacement there. He'll do the job. He's played at Colorado last season, only a 51.7 PFF grade, but in those like latter parts of the season, that Colorado defense was on the field a lot, to be fair. And then they also brought in Asa Turner from Washington, 76.2 PFF grade at safety last year for them.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say about Florida in their transfer portal haul. I think with what the talent that they added overall, especially at some of their weaker spots from last year, I'd give it about a B+. It's very good. Really like Cormani McClain and his talent. He's a super blue chip, was one of the highest rated prospects coming out of high school. He transfers over from Colorado. He's got the talent needed to be really good in that secondary, be a difference maker there. Also Turner from Washington, now going into his 6th year, so he's experienced. He's got 6 interceptions in his career, along with 148 tackles and 7 tackles for loss. Really like the experience and football IQ that he's going to bring to the table. Linebacker, was a key need for Florida this year. It was supposed to be a bright spot, but the shine quickly faded last year. Shamar James went down with an injury, which affected that position. Scooby Williams is gone now, so they bring in a guy, Grayson Howard from South Carolina, who's going to be a guy to watch on this defense this year. And then you also get Jameer Grimsley, a corner from Alabama, who's a former 4-star recruit, who I think could be a solid depth piece with a guy like Jason Marshall Jr. Returning for this upcoming season, which is great news for Florida. So on defense, I really like what they did along with some of their returning production. Offensively, I think they could have done a little more, but the key add here was Elijah Badger, the receiver from Arizona State, 65 catches, 713 yards, 3 touchdowns in 2023 at Arizona State. And I think he'll get better quarterback play with Graham Mertz at the helm this upcoming season. You also get Chamir Deek. I'm not quite sure how you say his last name, a wide receiver from Wisconsin who's a younger guy but could contribute. And then Devon Manuel, an offensive tackle from Arkansas, and Jason Zandamela, a center from USC, a 4-year center with eligibility remaining at USC. So some depth for the offensive line. Like what they did in the portal, like what they have coming back on both sides of the ball, Graham Mertz, Montrell Johnson, Eugene Wilson on the offensive side. And then on the defensive side, you get your top backer in Shamar James. You get Jason Marshall in the secondary back. You get Cam Jackson and Tyreek Sapp on the defensive line. This Florida roster is very, very talented. And if Graham Mertz can continue to make progressions, it's going to be a talented, good football team. But what they're going up against this year is not going to be easily circumnavigated. It's a brutal, brutal schedule. So do you have anything else that you wanted to add to that part of the discussion before we make some schedule analysis and record predictions?
No, I think you touched on everything.
Okay. We were going to do 3 interesting players, but we'll hold off on that for this particular episode because we're running short on time. So for Florida, I don't remember exactly what their over-under win total was. I think it was
4.5. Yeah.
When you look at their schedule for this upcoming year, I don't know if you have it pulled up, but it's Miami, Sanford, Texas A&M, at Mississippi State, by UCF, at Tennessee, Kentucky, by, and then that last 5-game stretch of Georgia, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State. When you look at this brutality of a schedule that the SEC gave them, do you see them going over or under that win total?
I think 4.5 is a little harsh. I do think there's a lot of talent on this team, man. And like with this level of offensive talent, I do think that they're going to be able to put up points on just about every team. I still, like I like Graham Mertz. I don't love Graham Mertz. I do think he is a little bit conservative as a quarterback at times. But he is very good in terms of he's not going to turn the ball over. I think he had a less than 3% turnover-worthy play percentage last season, which was, I think, 98th percentile in college football. So, his conservative play style, I would like to see him let it rip a little bit more with these playmakers on the outside, and just kind of hopefully get this offense to a different level this season where they're able to, still put up those 35-point games against the really, really good defenses that they're going to play. I think that's what it's going to be about. I think it's going to be about whether Graham Mertz plays a little bit more aggressive in terms of decision making.
Yeah, I think I'll ultimately go over 4.5. I think it'll probably land around 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So to get to 5, in my opinion, you have to beat Samford at home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have to beat UCF, who could be a dangerous Big 12 team, but you have to win that game.
You have to win.
At home.
Yeah.
I also think you probably have to beat Miami week 1. Josh Pate talked about this on his last episode of Late Kick. He was talking about the 5 biggest swing games in college football for this upcoming season. The games that could change the way that we view a team's season or team seasons for this upcoming season. Games that could swing your record or your season one way or the other. And one of the games on that list was this Florida-Miami game, week 1. It's in Gainesville, as far as I know. They're in-state rivals. Miami's a very talented team with one of the best quarterbacks supposedly in the country this upcoming season. They're going to have to win probably 2 of these other home games. You have to beat UCF. You have to beat Samford. And then you got to get at least 2 other home games, whether it's Kentucky, whether it's Texas A&M, maybe you can get them early on in week 3, or maybe you pick off an LSU or Ole Miss later on in the season. But you're going to have to play, I think, very well at home, because I think your best opportunity just on paper to win on the road is at Mississippi State in week 4. When it's all said and done, actually, Florida's best chance at getting to like 5 or 6 wins, in my opinion, is going to be going 3-1 in their first 4 games. That Miami, Samford, Texas A&M at Mississippi State stretch before their first bye week, in my opinion, is where they gotta start fast out of the gates, because the last 8 games on their schedule, I don't know if you can chalk up any of those as surefire 100% wins right now. Not to say that they're not going to win any of them, but hell, none of those you can just say, oh, that's a dub.
Or you can't really say that, oh, they're the more complete team on paper. You can't really say that either because of their questions on defense.
Exactly. So when you take all of that into consideration, this Florida team has to start fast. But in the good spirits of this podcast and what I've watched from Graham Mertz so far, last year he didn't blow you away statistically, and it wasn't the greatest Florida team of all time, as we now know. But he was very solid. He threw for 330 yards against Utah. That's a top 15 program, a very good defense, and almost 430 yards against South Carolina last year. He had some really nice performances. He threw for almost 3,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. And I guess above all of that, like above the surface statistics, he led the SEC in completion percentage at almost 73%. and threw an SEC low 3 interceptions. If he can keep the turnovers on the down low like he did last year, maybe up the touchdowns a little bit, go from, I'm not asking for much. I'm not asking for a Heisman campaign. I'm asking like maybe keep it around 20 to 25 touchdowns. Just be efficient. Complete 68 to 70% of your passes. An efficient clip. Take care of the ball. And let the talent around you do a lot of the work. This Florida roster, ultimately, I think, was even with some of the questions on their defense, will go as far as Graham Mertz allows them to go. And I'm not, when I say that, we're not talking about the playoff, at least we think with this Florida team, or getting close to that. But in terms of having the season that I think they'll want to have in year 3, that's kind of where it stands. So Florida's an interesting team. I did want to talk about them because I know you're interested in Graham Mertz from a quarterback standpoint and what you watched from him. They brought in some good talent in the portal. They have a talented roster. But as we know, when you're looking at coaches that are really under pressure to win this season or to have some success, to take a step forward, it's Billy Napier and then a couple other names and everyone else. So that's where Florida stands. If you're a Florida fan, you disagree with anything that we say here, feel free to comment or chime in on another episode and we can circle back around to this discussion. Emmy, I'm going to give you an option here. It is 11:48 and we've gone over an hour. We got Florida in tonight. Do you want to go ahead and do Miami, or do you want to save that for our next hit hole here in a couple days?
I kind of want to do it, but I am kind of tired though.
You make the call.
Let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and do it.
All right.
Screw it.
So, let me get to my Miami.
I just find it so funny that I ended up frozen in that.
It is kind of funny, isn't it? All right. So for Miami, Mario Cristobal, similar to Billy Napier, is going into his 3rd year as the head coach at Miami. Of course, he played at Miami as an offensive tackle from 1988 to 1992. And he's got prior head coaching experience, 5 years at Florida International and 4 years at Oregon, right? I mean, Miami takes him from Oregon. And so far in 2 years at Miami, first year was a little rough, right? I mean, 5-7. That's how a lot of coaches kind of do in taking over in their first year. Nothing too surprising there. But then last year, 7-6. And of course, you had the disaster in not kneeling at the end of the Georgia Tech game, which they lost. That was a complete and utter disaster, the decisions that were made at the end of that game. But nonetheless, they did make a leap in terms of record last year from year 1, although I don't think it could have been better. And I think if you ask Miami fans, it was still a little underwhelming for the schedule that they had. So, with that being said, Mario Cristobal, same question I asked you about Billy Napier in Florida. On the pressure meter, 1 to 10, how much pressure is on him to take Miami to this year 3 leap to where they actually want to be, which is right atop the ACC competing with Florida State, right? How much pressure is on him this year to get wherever you think this Miami program needs to be?
This one definitely depends on how you look at it. For me, I'm probably just going to stick with an 8 for both of these. But you could look at it this way, where you kind of see it as glass half full. He's recruiting very well at a small private school. This is not a you know like going to a Oregon, a public state school. This is not what that is, right? This is a small private school. So he's recruiting well. He's brought in good talent in the transfer portal. He's brought in a premier quarterback through the transfer portal, and the expectations are through the roof. But to me, it's not about how many wins they get per se. Obviously, they got to get at least 7. I think that's without saying. If he doesn't get to 7 wins, he's gone. But if they look good and they say they win 8 games and they, are competitive in those big games against the Florida States and do they play Florida State this year? I can't remember. But yeah, if they're competitive in those big games, I think you can kind of convince yourself to bring him back at that point. But it would definitely be, a decision to be made for sure.
Interesting. I view it kind of differently. I think the pressure is definitely not as high as Billy Napier at Florida. Just because, as opposed to Billy Napier, there was an actual improvement year to year.
Yeah, true.
Even if it was the slightest improvement from year 1 to year 2. Now, I think the expectation from at least the most informed or a group of non-casual college football fans is for Miami to maybe not make the year 3 leap that, say, Sark did and go from 8 wins to winning the conference and making the playoff. Like maybe not 8 or maybe not 7 to 11 or 12 wins. But I think this is reflected in their over-under win total with the schedule that they have. I think the expectation for Miami actually is to win 8 games minimum, but actually 9 games is, I think, the realistic expectation with the schedule that they have. I think 9 games and the pressure on Cristobal to win those 9 games is, I think, around a 7.5, not quite as extreme as Billy Napier, but I think if he were to go, if he goes 7-5 again with this schedule, the conversations will be had. I don't know that they'll fire him, but those conversations will be had. And the reason I say I don't think they'll fire him is because this is his alma mater. He has some pull at this school, and he's recruiting at an elite level. And I mean, we're going to talk about this, but I thought Miami did a really good job in the portal, both in the winter and in the spring. I don't think they would fire him unless it's a complete disaster. But I think the pressure to get to minimum 8 in, I think, 9 wins with the schedule that they have, is I just don't see them losing a lot of games, especially now that they have an elite quarterback in Cam Ward.
Yeah.
I think they got to win 9. Maybe it's 8 in the regular season. They win a bowl game. But I think they have to win 9 or else conversations will be had. But minimum 8. Like 8 is the minimum. Bare minimum.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said. To me, it's just about they, at a lot of points last season looked very talented and just remarkably incompetent. And that's the reason why I had the I guess meter so high for first of all is because they turned the ball over 22 times last year. Not to mention obviously the whole kneeling thing, and then you got the giving up however many yards to Texas A&M in that game. I mean, yeah, I mean there's a lot to question in terms of the coaching job that was done last year. So I think that is what needs improvement for sure, and win 9 games.
Absolutely. So in terms of what Miami did in the transfer portal and what the talent acquisition, how they went about the portal, both in the winter and the spring put together, how would you assess it? What stands out to you?
Well, main one is obvious. It's Cam Ward, man. I think I can speak for both of us in saying we are very high on what Cam Ward will bring to the table this season, man. I think you know the transfer portal stuff, you just mentioned it. They nailed it this year. They brought in, secondary help. They kind of overhauled their defensive line as well. I think they're deeper in that department, despite losing Leonard Taylor, who was a 5-star when he went to Miami. I think they've added depth in key spots on that defense. I think they're going to be more consistent as a unit because of it, just because they're going to be fresher at key moments in the game. They gave up over 30 points, I think 4 times last season. So getting that number down, and I think they lost 4 of those games as well. So I think that's going to be a key thing, and that's why they emphasize depth in the portal so much. And I say depth, I don't want to make that seem like they didn't get top level talent. They did. They brought in very high level talent to their secondary. I really want to stress that.
Yeah. For me, going back to the point you made before I get into the portal about the actual on-field coaching, which does need to improve, what I will point out, just as a side note to that, is last year, Miami didn't have the continuity that I think it would have liked to have on Billy Napier's staff. It was year one of an offensive coordinator, and it was year one of a defensive coordinator at the same time. Shannon Dawson was in his first year. He's now going into his second year as Miami's coordinator and quarterbacks coach. And in his first season, they still went from 97th in 2022 to 39th last year in scoring offense. So I think a jump into the top 30 or maybe even top 20 with the addition of Cam Ward would be expected with some of the other offensive talent they brought in. But they were also dealing with a first-year defensive coordinator as well. And sometimes with first-year defensive coordinators, defenses can struggle. You're still learning the system. If it's a new defensive scheme, you might have new players that committed to the last defensive coordinator may have left the program, and you have new guys. You don't have the depth that you want in year two, of the Billy Napier era at Miami. So I'm not making excuses for any of the coaching that went on at Miami last season. I'm just saying we have to provide the proper context around it.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the portal, they did. I think this is one of the best portal classes in the country. I'd give it a solid A. You get the quarterback. You get the kind of quarterback that I think if everything goes according to plan for Miami, they get good health, they get the kind of coaching that you think they need with Cristobal, who we know can do it, just hasn't happened yet at Miami. They get the coordinators on the same page. They get some of this young talent to perform. They start developing guys. They start putting guys in the NFL. The returning production stays healthy. It's a lot to ask, but Cam Ward's the kind of guy that can turnkey this team to like being in the ACC championship
Being in
and
the playoffs,
potentially
yeah.
winning it. That's how good he is, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And he could vault himself, into maybe some first round discussions in next year's draft. And I say that with a grain of salt, given I really haven't studied next year's draft at all. But could happen. We've seen it.
He could
those
certainly
kind of
be
things happen
in New
before.
York for the Heisman stuff, for
Yeah.
the Heisman ceremony, for sure.
So they have, I think, one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in the ACC. Talking about 3,700 yards, 25 touchdowns last year at Washington State. He's also good with his legs, 8 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he's tremendous. He's a good athlete. He could be, as you mentioned, in the Heisman Trophy conversation when it's all said and done. They got a really good running back, Damian Martinez from Oregon State, who ran for over 2,000 yards in his 2 seasons with the Beavers. Averaged 6.1 yards per carry in 2022 and 2023. So he's a 6 yards per carry back. Very productive. He'll join a running back room that already includes Mark Fletcher and Ajay Allen. They're deeper at running back. They have a stud now. They're rock solid at slot receiver with Xavier Restrepo, who's going to be one of the better receivers potentially, not only in the ACC, but in the country next year if he stays healthy. And they brought in a couple receivers. One I really like in Samuel Brown from the University of Houston, who I think could be a productive player for them. So I really like their offense. Like, they did a very good job also getting Zach Carpenter, an interior offensive lineman from Indiana who's made 27 starts in 4 years. He should slot right in for them on that offensive line. In the second year of an offensive coordinator, I expect this offense to take another step. And defensively, they did just as well, if not better. Like, I know that's hard to say, but you think about what they added. They added 3 key pieces on the interior of that defensive line. So they're going to be deeper and more experienced on the interior of that defensive line. They added CJ Clark, a transfer defensive tackle from NC State. What do you think about when you think about NC State the past couple of years? You think about defense. You think about Peyton Wilson. You think about a bunch of other guys that they've had on that defense. CJ Clark was one of those guys, very productive. They add Tyler Barron, who's an edge rusher from Louisville, one of the better edge rushers in the portal. Spent the first couple of years of his college career at Tennessee, 13 and a half sacks last year. Yes, I believe. Very productive player. You also get Simeon Barrow Jr., who is a very good defensive lineman from Michigan State that Texas was after when it was all said and done. CJ Clark, 40 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks at NC State. And then Simeon Barrow from Michigan State was also very productive, along with Tyler Barron. So the front of your defense is much, much improved with much more experience. And then you added a couple more pieces to go along with that. Marley Cook, another defensive tackle from Middle Tennessee. So they're prioritizing the line of scrimmage. They have more skilled talent. The way that they're recruiting is elite. I think they're going to be top 10 classes for most of the next couple of years, as long as Mario is here and the staff is here. Where they really need to improve defensively is being disruptive and forcing more turnovers, getting to the quarterback. They were 60th in takeaways last year. So I think they need to increase. If you're not going to be great, say on the back end, you may give up yards, you're more of a bin, but don't break defense. You're going to need to, I think, be more disruptive and make more plays. I think they have the talent to do it. So I actually really like what Miami did in the portal. And I think it's all for one goal, which is we've got Cam Ward. We have him for 1 year. He's one of the better quarterbacks in college football. We know we have to win this year. Let's go do it. Let's do everything in our power to go do it. And that's what their portal efforts show with the talent that they acquired. So with all that being said, look at their schedule. If you have it in front of you, if not, I can read it out to you. Their over-under win total that I got off the internet was, I believe, 9.5. So there are high expectations for Miami this year. Would you go over or under?
Ooh. I would probably you know what? I'd probably lean over just because I believe in Cam Ward, man. I think if we're ranking quarterbacks in the ACC, I mean, he's the most proven right now. I think that's fair to say. And I think for me personally, he's probably the one I trust the most. If you look at the ACC quarterbacks right now, Florida State with a new quarterback, Clemson returning Cade Klubnik, who still has his question marks. I think if this Miami team wants to, get to 10 wins, it has to be because the defense holds up just a little bit better. They remove those costly turnovers that they were having. They just improve in situational football, like just late game situation stuff that happened last year. That can't happen. If they want to get to 10 wins, they got to be sharper. And with a veteran quarterback like Cam Ward, I expect them to be.
Yeah, I've been going back and forth between under at 9 wins and over at 10 wins. But I think I can be convinced to go over. You look at their schedule. I mean, I think as opposed to Florida's schedule, where you really can't chalk up anything beyond Samford and maybe Mississippi State and one more. When you look at Miami, I think you can chalk up Florida A&M. As long as this team is well coached with better talent, you can chalk up Florida A&M at home, Ball State at home. I think you can even chalk up at USF. It's not a very good football program. Just don't do what Alabama did at USF last year and have that game close in the second half. Right. Cal comes into the ACC this year. They haven't been a football power, to my knowledge, since Aaron Rodgers was there. So don't think you have to worry much about them. Virginia Tech at home could be between all these other games that I'm mentioning, Florida A&M, Ball State, at USF, at California, games they should win that can help them get to that 10-win mark, games that I'm counting on them to win in this prediction. You got Virginia Tech at home on a Friday night, right in the middle of all that. Past Miami teams lose that game. This Miami team, if you want to get to 10 wins, has to be focused and win that game. And one of the reasons I think they will is because they have Cam Ward, a quarterback who could take this offense to the next level. And I do think the coaching is going to be better. I mean, 10 returning starters on offense is a lot. And then you add the guys that you add. The one non-returning starter, I think, is the quarterback. And you upgraded at that position.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, you on the second half of the schedule, I think there are 2 losable games, and they come actually 3 losable games. At Louisville. Louisville is going to be a good football team. We saw them in the ACC championship game this past year. They returned their quarterback. They have a good defense. That could be a tough game.
Right.
Not saying they will lose it, but it's a losable one. Florida State is, of course, a losable one. But the good thing for Miami, you get that at home. But I say that with a grain of salt because, let's be honest, like Miami's home field advantage really isn't.
Yeah,
it's not to the
really
level
isn't
that
one.
it's not really one. And then at Georgia Tech could be interesting. Georgia Tech's going to be much improved. At Syracuse, actually, at the end of the season could be interesting as well. But I do think they'll get to 10 wins. And if they go under, I do think it'll be 9. And if they go 9-3, I think they could get, depending on what happens with the rest of the ACC, they could get into the college football playoff. They could get into the ACC championship game with actually the chance to punch their ticket to the college football playoff. Because if you remember, Power 4
if you win your conference.
Yeah, you get a top 4 seed. Miami could be sitting at 10-3 with a conference championship in their bag and a top 4 seed in the playoff when it's all said and done.
Jeez.
And I think, a 10-2 Texas or whatever it might be that doesn't win their conference, maybe it's an 11-2 Texas that loses in the SEC championship game that could potentially be a 6th seed sitting behind a Big 12 and ACC championship game. I don't think SEC teams are going to be too happy about that, but it is what it is in this new 12-team college football playoff. So that's that on Miami. Anything else? Any closing remarks?
Well, I just think I like that we chose these 2 teams. Considering they're going to be playing each other week 1, so we're going to find some stuff out about both of them, like right from the jump.
I thought it was a good place to begin.
Definitely.
We won't actually get into that. Longer episode than I anticipated, but we got it in for the most part. So thank you to Emmy. Thank you to anyone that watches. What we'll try to do at some point this week is we'll try to at least timestamp the episode and maybe eventually cut the previews out in a separate video.
Yeah.
We may or may not do that. It might not be right away, but maybe eventually. But thank you guys for listening. Give us your over-under win total predictions for both Miami and Florida, whether you're fans of them or not. Maybe you could care less, but what do you guys think is going to happen this upcoming college football season? On our next episode of Dit Hole, which I'm going to have to talk about the plans with Emmy off the air, we'll probably not have a lot of other topics. It might just be team previews, and it might be 3 teams, but we'll have to see. And we'll try to go a little bit more in depth so that we can get into like the 3 players that we're watching and so forth.
All right,
Our next
you
set
can't
of teams.
see me, but I'm nodding right now.
Yeah. And then other things to look out for. NFL previews starting on Thursday. That's going to be very, very fun. This is one of our favorite times of year. And the way that we did the NFL previews last year, different than in years past, we really liked. And so we're going to do it again. We're just going to structure it a little bit differently in the way that we break out the episodes. But it's going to be the same kind of content. So be ready for that. We're counting down our power rankings 20-1, but we do have the rankings separated into, I believe it's 4 tiers, but there's only
4 tiers. Yeah.
There's only one team in the top tier. And you can probably, if you have a brain, guess who that top team is.
Yeah, there's only one team. There's only one team that won't have tiers at the end of the season.
But with all that being said, something else to look out for. And I have not talked with Emmy about this, but I'm going to mention it here. 1 or 2 Olympic previews are going to be coming here soon. As the Olympics is
thought about that.
In about 2.5 weeks, I believe. So probably next week, but those episodes are coming in some form or fashion. Whether it's 1 or 2, something regarding the Olympics will be out
what
there.
if we did like an Olympic sport draft? Would you be down for that?
I was thinking that, but I was also thinking potentially like a U.S. Olympic athlete draft as well. But we'll have to figure out.
That could be fun as well. Yeah.
We'll have to figure out how we're going to maybe if we can do 2 Olympic episodes in the time that is allotted to us before the Olympics start. I think it's July 26th, I believe, is when they begin, which is actually the day before I leave on my next little vacation. We can do one draft in one episode and the other in another episode. We still have a good amount of time. But with all that being said, as we're now to an hour 40 minutes, apologies for the long episode. After midnight here in the Central Time Zone, for Emmy Nixon, for Michael Ween, keep your horns up, and we will see you on Thursday. Peace out.
You'll hopefully see me moving as well.